For my project, the crop I chose is tomatoes. The tomato is a member of the nightshade family, Solanaceae, which means it's related to other things like eggplants and peppers, and other common vegetables. Its typical growth habit can be from bush-like or viney, depending on the cultivar. Tomato plants are easily manipulated and can be trellised and trained and pruned. There are many different cultivars and heirloom varieties of tomatoes that can be used for different cooking purposes as well as eating plain and transferring them into sauces. Other products that our farm would produce would be tomato sauce, canned tomatoes, and sun-dried tomatoes, which have longer shelf lives and can be sold during winter markets. This is my chosen production site. As you can see, I've outlined it into production site 1, production site 2, and production site 3. Production site 1 and 2 are going to be the main raised beds, and production site 3 is really for the indoor growing portion. Some of the production site would have to be changed as it is initially, so I would be shrinking the parking lots by removing concrete with machinery, digging to the clean soil and leveling the area, and then installing raised beds over the existing soil and turf, filling in with organic clean soil, and then pruning some of the trees to allow light. Here I've mapped out the microclimate with the major thermal mass being the blacktop. So reducing that would help with radiating heat in the nighttime. And the eastern side, there is some blockage from the sun with those trees, but some of those would be pruned. And there's a lot of potential for pollution on the road at the top. There is also a downward slope to the property, which could potentially change stormwater runoff. And if the road is right there, there could be the potential for water running from the road into the property. I've also labeled here that the roof has potential for green roof, which could reduce some of the thermal mass coming from the asphalt and the asphalt shingles. Here are the main beds that are going to be laid out for the production area. I added a third production site, which would be behind the building. So technically there are 4 production sites, but the main raised beds where the crop will be grown are going to be 4 foot wide by 15 foot long with 4 foot walking paths in between. The beds were designed with a manageable reach of 2 foot from each side of the bed without tools, and the pathways were designed to allow a push mower and a wheelbarrow to fit through them comfortably. Granular fertilizer, like plant tone, will be spread by hand, and with a hose nozzle, the fish emulsion can be sprayed over the entire crop. The seeds will be obtained online through catalogs and from Research University donations for cultivar trials. Plants will be started by seed indoors under lights. They'll be grown into 2-inch pots, and then they'll be transplanted into 4-inch pots within the greenhouse. The 4-inch pots are then planted outdoors into the beds. All of the plants are planted by hand, and then a drip irrigation bubble will be placed at the base of them. Here's the layout with the X's being the plants. So the plants will be spaced 2 in each bed, which is 4 foot wide, and they'll be placed going along the entire bed. Some pruning will be required to allow airflow and keep the canopies apart from each other at times, and lower branches might need to be pruned off. Here's a quick reference to where the composting area is and the tool shed and some of the infrastructure that's not yet laid out in the base map. This sketch shows the pathways for foot traffic, the irrigation points, the tool sheds, the composting bins, and water access. For harvesting, the beds will be harvested in numerical order with pruners and plastic harvesting containers. The harvest stages move in numerical order. So harvest stage 1 is where you would take the tomatoes into the indoors and rinse them and save some for processing and save some for market. Harvest stage 2 is the table and the farm stand out in the parking lot where some of the product will be brought to be sold. Once the crop is harvested, the debris and plant materials will be cut at the root and moved to the compost area. The beds will be raked clean and large root masses will be removed. Afterwards, the beds will be solarized with plastic for the winter and held down with bricks, and the tools will be cleaned and sanitized and stored for the winter. Tomatoes are good crops for urban areas because most people don't have access to fresh tomatoes. So, fresh tomatoes and sauces taste very different than imported tomatoes, which are usually picked early, even green, and transported. That way, they won't bruise and be damaged by the time they reach the consumer. And in the ripening process, a lot of places will use ethylene gas to ripen the tomatoes before sale. So, fresh tomatoes are always going to have a market, especially in urban areas with kitchens and restaurants, as well as consumers looking for better quality tomatoes. There's really no limit to this crop. It's a crop that has been loved for many years by many different cultures. It's used in cuisine all around the world, and it has really become a staple in many households, with being sauces, tomatoes, plain, sun-dried tomatoes, ketchup, or any of the different components that tomatoes make up. So tomato will always be a crop that people are looking for, that people want to cook with, and that people really like. I think that there will always be a market for tomatoes, especially fresh heirloom variety tomatoes that have great flavor.